Hi, and welcome to Soft Human Voice. This is a podcast dedicated to helping you remember your source and divine connection. And this is a bigger statement today because we have my guest, Veronika Robinson, who is a celebrant professionally. And so I'm going to talk to you about, or we're both going to talk to you about what that means, what it means to be a celebrant. But should I say funeral celebrant, Veronica? Like, how would you
I do
say it?
weddings, I do all rites of passage,
Yeah,
but you can put funeral
yeah,
celebrant. Yeah.
yeah. Do you mostly do funerals or do you do
These days I do.
these
Yeah.
days?
Yeah.
So I've been wanting to talk to Veronica for a long time and specifically about death. So this is interesting. We're going to have a let's talk about death today podcast. And so before we begin, I just want to remind you that you are not alone. You are loved, you are wise, you're intuitive, and you have way more co creative power than you think. And so I started this podcast to help us remember this together. And one of the things I like to do every day, and sometimes on the podcast, is to have a little reconnection practice. So, Veronica and I are going to just go through a little guided practice meditation just to center and ground. And you can do this with us. So, to do this, just close your eyes. And only if you're not driving. But if you're in a safe, stationary space, feel free to do this now. And just feel the back of your body resting, being supported by the surface of your chair or sofa. Just bring your awareness to the backside. Feel the quality of connection here. You feel soft, some texture from your clothing or from the cushions behind you. And coming into your body a little more deeply, noticing if your muscles are feeling soft or tight or what's going on. Scooch into your seat a little bit more. Connect with your pelvic bowl, an area that holds your digestive and reproductive organs. And also it's the seat of your feminine intuition, the seat of truth. And feel your bottoms of your feet on the floor. And how does that feel? Is there warmth or coolness underneath your feet? And then just allow your awareness to scan the back of the seat, the legs, the feet. Back, your seat, legs, feet. If you can connect with this with your breaths, your exhale, that would be great. So again, back, seat, legs, and feet. feet, legs, and feet. And one more time. Back, feet, legs. And as you breathe naturally, and see if you can follow that connection, keep it flowing with your breath. Allowing your awareness to trace those points, to connect with your body. It holds so much wisdom, so much knowing when we remember to listen to it. And feel how strong that connection is when you attend to it. So much sensation possible, so much awareness to tune into. Dropping out of your mind and into your body is such a gift. So as we close this brief reconnection practice, you can decide to take this awareness into your day whenever you find yourself ruminating, thinking, caught up in an energy. You can always return to the spine and the seat, the legs, and your feet, to your embodied connection. And slow down and remember the peace and the joy and the light that you are. Veronica's glowing in the almost Eve light from the UK. Tell us where you're located.
I live in rural Cumbria, so it's the far north of England, about half an hour from the Scottish border.
Nice. So I'm going to introduce you to Veronika. Let me introduce myself for those who are new. I'm Jessica Shepard. I am an author of several books. A Love Alchemist Notebook and Venus Signs were a couple of my first. I'm a healer, astrologer, energy practitioner, qigong teacher, artist. I do a lot of things. And one of the reasons I think that Veronika and I connected was through my books, right? I think you reached out to me.
Fast. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we started talking, and I recognize that you're an author as well. You're a writer and author of many books. So I'm going to read Veronika's bio, and then we'll start talking. Veronika says, perhaps with her penetrating Scorpio moon Venus and dreamy Neptune conjunction tucked away in the mysterious realms of the otherworldly 12th house, to mention Pluto parading in her 10th house, Veronika was born to speak about death, grief, and transformation. Veronika is a second-generation astrologer, author, celebrant trainer, and founder of Penrith's first Death Cafe. Over the years as a funeral celebrant, she's had the privilege of noting the birth and death charts of the recently departed. Veronika is the author of Write That Eulogy and Funerals for Children. And I would say, Veronika, you're also the author of some really awesome fiction and magical, what is it? Magical realism fiction, which I've read and loved. Death has knocked on her door a number of times, each time with the gift of rendering her into a new version of herself. And you can find Veronika on www.veronikawithak.robinson.com. All right. So we have Miss Veronika to talk to us today about death. Like I was telling you when we first got on the Zoom, is that I don't know why I'm so excited to talk to you about this, other than it's been like building up for years, I think. And knowing that you're an astrologer and you may have made some observations that either corroborate my own, or you might hold a worldview of death that has an affinity with me, that was really exciting too. Maybe I could just start out by you talking about what a funeral celebrant does specifically.
So for me, where I am in England, my job is to meet with the bereaved family and to work with them to create a ceremony that reflects their loved one's life and that panoramic view of someone's life story, whether they've lived for 20 weeks in utero or whether they've lived for 90 years on the earth. And there'll be things like helping them with their music choices or if they want a reading, but primarily my job, apart from managing the time we have in a crematorium or at a burial space, aside from that, it's really about learning who their loved one was.
Yeah. So would you say you're a storyteller when it comes
Absolutely.
to... Yeah.
I think of it as biographical storytelling. And if you think I'm going into the house of a stranger or strangers, and my job is to come away feeling like I knew their loved one. And I'm doing in the space of about 2 hours.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you're taking in a lot of information. You're trying to encapsulate an entire lifetime of achievements and connections and who they mean to loved ones. And I just can imagine you're just super porous and as a writer and kind of working in channels, just taking it in and then using your inspiration to lead you into a compelling story that celebrates their life.
Yeah. And also, when you're working with people, a lot of the time you're working with the nonverbal language as well. You just read in the room, and I can walk into a house with a family, and without anyone telling me any backstory, I can immediately tell those two siblings haven't spoken for 30 years. I can just feel it. Or, that was the bossy sibling, and they're still the bossy one. And of course, particularly when parents die, the hierarchy of the family is who's in charge now, who's in charge now. And every time I walk in, that's what I'm dealing with, is that sort of energy. And it doesn't matter if someone's 70 years old, they're still going to be like they're 7 years old when they're with their sibling who might be the same sort of
dynamic.
It doesn't change, even if they haven't seen each other for 30 years.
That is so wild.
So, you have all that stuff alongside what you do here. And also what's interesting is that just by the nature of being human, we see people through our own lens, our own filter. And you can have 10 people in a room, all with completely different views of the person who has died.
Right.
So trying to amalgamate that as well.
Wow.
And
Are you on God, Veronika? Are you on God?
Yeah.
Because I definitely have a question about how you deal with all of that.
So I was a wedding celebrant for 20 years before I did my first funeral.
Okay.
I never wanted to go into this work because it was like, oh my God, I will cry. I won't be able to cope. And so I was dragged kicking and screaming into it, if you like.
I can imagine.
Through the lines. Yeah. And when they said, I knew that it was for a friend, her dad had died. And when he was ill, they said, we want you to do the funeral. You've done the wedding, you've done the children's namings, you'll be doing Dad's funeral. He took 5 years to die, so I had to be before me. But when he did die, and I had about a week to prepare for it, I just cried all week because I thought, I can't do this. Even though my skill set's the same as what I would do for any other ceremony, but it was that, all that other emotion and holding a space for people. Practice makes perfect and all that. That's the secret. You go through it enough times that you learn to just shift that emotion to a different part of your body, for better or worse. You know, it doesn't have repercussions, but my job isn't to stand there crying with everyone else. It's to hold that space so that they can cry. They can be, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so for you, because I'm empathic too, and for those who don't know what that means, it is. So when you have empathy for another, you can understand what they're going through, and it's more of a mental, somewhat emotional, but more mental process. If you are an empath, which is a noun, if you are an empath, you experience others' emotions as your own. And it's not a conscious decision, right? It's just like I enter a room, I have a feeling. Where did that come from? And for you, curious, because even as I started looking at some charts, which we're going to talk about, I was looking at the charts of the time my mother died, which was almost 27 years ago. So I was looking at those charts of her death and my transits, and I just started empathing and energy sensitivity just right back into those moments. It was a bit uncomfortable. I had to go take some space, get back into my body, acknowledge what was happening. So for you, do you have to do some practices after you leave a deceased house or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm much better these days. When I first started out, honestly, I would come back, get a hot water bottle and just go to bed.
Yeah.
Whether it was after a family visit or a funeral. I'm completely different now. I do always have the need to go and sit out in the garden to earth myself a bit. But it's been a process. It really took a long time for me to manage that.
I imagine it's taken me years. It's definitely been a process of understanding how energies affect me and the forms of self-care I need to totally offload and come back to myself. It's just a personal interest. I know I didn't talk about this with you beforehand, but definitely that's me. At any rate, yeah.
Just with you mentioning empathy, because people often use the word empathy or empathetic when they're talking about compassion, and they're two really different things. I think compassion is something you can learn and show, but empathy is you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
You pick up the feelings or the thoughts, just that energy of whether it's of people or of pets or of the energy in a building, all those sorts of things.
Yeah. It was a big light bulb moment for me when I learned that empath was a actual noun, describe as person, place, or thing. Like it is a description of a person rather than an action. So somebody who has that happening, it's like your name is Veronika, you have your color of hair, you are an empath, versus that kind of more conscious, I can lead myself to compassion, I can lead myself to understanding, I can put myself in the other person's shoes. It just happens like that for those of us who are empaths.
So the way I think of it is, or experience is, if I saw someone fall over and scrape their knee, for example, it would hurt me more than them. I physically would experience that.
Totally. And yeah, it takes some skill for those of us. It takes skill, practice, techniques, tools, so much awareness. I would say number one, that, oh, this is happening and it's not mine.
And sometimes it can happen. I remember years ago, I would have been, I don't know, maybe 24 or something. And it was the first time I came to England, and I was in a spiritualist church, and I'd just gone and I'd sat down in the audience and hadn't quite started, and I hadn't looked around or anything like that, but suddenly my arm just started aching out of nowhere. And I was like, oh my God, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? And then a couple of minutes later, I looked up to the end of the row I was on, and there was a woman who had her arm in a cast.
So amazing.
And it's like, I had no way of knowing that, but
I
I picked that up.
I know. It's often we learn about this through those uncomfortable experiences too. I have
Yeah.
many stories like, oh, that person's mentally ill. Oh, wow, I
Yeah.
just learned that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So whole side. So I was thinking of this for you when you walk into a room full of people in grief and so many people. And that's why I was like picturing you using all your water skills, all your astrological water planets and house placements. She's just absorbing and really precognitively knowing what's going on with people and then having to sort that out a bit, right? So that's really interesting from an astrological point of view, too.
So one of the things I do, I primarily with my funeral work, I'm in a crematorium. I do burials as well, but mostly in the crematorium. And you can imagine you've got however many, maybe a dozen, 10 or so funerals a day in there.
Yeah.
It's like a factory farm. Every 40 minutes, there's a ceremony. It's this factory farm of people pouring their grief into that building.
Yes.
So that's my workspace when I go in. So when I'm at the lectern and people are walking in, taking their seat, what I'm doing is in my mind, I'm imagining there are drain holes up that aisle, not for people to fall down, but I'm just in my mind, just going, anything that doesn't belong here, just let it go. Let the grief just go down there for Mother Earth to take. Otherwise, it's all going to come to me. I don't want it in there.
Good for you. I was thinking, no, there's no sage stick big enough for that task. You have to use your awareness and your own magical powers to ground that, to offload that before it even touches you when you're dealing with that much energy. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That gives me goosebumps. I can feel that. I'm like, is it my nightmare? A little bit. Pluto 12th house. Yeah, a little bit.
At one level, I'm also energetically putting my arms around everyone. Like,
you're responsible for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm looking out at maybe 150 faces, all grieving and whatever. All those faces are just looking at me. When you think of the energy and balance of that,
the dynamics of energy.
Yeah.
Just amazing. Wow. I could talk about this for our whole hour. I do feel like we need to talk about some other thing, but that is just like maybe for a next like energy sensitivity and just what you have to work through. It boggles my mind because I know that for me, my sensitivity is like a speck of dust on a white wall. So if you have this, it's just incredible.
I'm sure it's why I'm just increasingly becoming more and more a hermit. I do that work. I come home. I just don't want to see anyone. I just want to be in
and all the things I see you post, and this kind of actually can lead into our discussion more specifically around things that we can do to help ourselves through times when we're in grief or times when a loved one is going through a hard time. I notice on your social media, there's a lot of posts that come up that have flowers and cards and delicious food and nature scenes. And I'm like, oh, yes, I can see that's how you care for yourself. It just so comes through. You posted some beautiful flower that I had to share the other day, the champagne rose. And I was like, oh, somebody had given to you, I think.
Yeah. One of my wedding couples gave me that. Yeah.
So nature, when we're going through these kinds of hard passages, whether, a prolonged illness, I know that you recently lost your mother, and we have both talked about just little here's and there's and emails about losing our mothers. And we kind of plan to talk about their charts and look at what was going on there for them and for us. You recently lost your mother, and how are you helping yourself through this time that's really delicate?
And you can imagine as a funeral celebrant how I can tell you. So I had about 2 months notice that my mum was coming to the end of her life.
Okay.
Self-inflicted to some degree. But
And
when
what did she die of, Veronica, if you don't mind?
it's a really good question. She just refused to eat and drink in the end.
Oh,
It
was she
long
terminal already or no?
No, just a
Interesting.
long story of she'd been evicted from her flat
Okay.
the day before Christmas, and I think just feeling displaced and all the rest of it, and just, I'm done now.
She's decided she was ready.
Yeah, yeah. Just took a long time for her body to close down. As a funeral celebrant, when I'm holding that space for someone who's saying goodbye to their mum, particularly if their mum's the same age as mine, that was really traumatic.
Yeah.
I remember in the week before that week, there were songs like, and I can't remember the name of the song, but the lyrics were like, "You gave me my name and the color of my eyes." And music was so powerful. And it was just like, and I came out of there with tears, a bit apologetic to the funeral director. And it was like, we're all human. But of course, when you're in that role, you feel like you've got to be on top of it. But
did you feel it
realize-
coming when you were, do you think a part of you were getting prepared?
I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And I think when I put my hand on the coffin to say goodbye to someone's loved one, I'm thinking, oh my God, any day now, that's me saying goodbye. And it was really traumatic.
Yeah.
And that's without even putting into the trauma of her dying. And it's interesting because someone said to me recently, someone who has an inkling of my spiritual beliefs and that sort of thing. And he just said, I don't have to offer my condolences because I know what you believe. And I thought,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it's really interesting because
God.
you can have the biggest spiritual belief in the world and
Be leveled by death.
you are pummeled. And I don't know if it gets much deeper than the mother-child bond.
Yeah, it is.
So in terms of how I've been, nature is my number one go-to. I think all my life I've had that, but increasingly. So I have trees. I've got a particular tree in the garden I planted 12 years ago that was a tiny thing that's up to the sky, and I touch that every day. I'm always barefoot. One thing I've been doing each night at bedtime is putting castor oil in my belly button.
Oh, interesting.
And that's a really nice practice because there's so many, I don't even want to say how many thousand in case I get it wrong, but there are thousands of nerves in the belly button. And you think that connection and the placenta and all that sort of thing.
The umbilical cord and
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's just felt like a really nurturing thing to do.
It feels soothing when you say that. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I love that. Nature, self-care, oils, good food if you are up for it, cooking your own food, eating healthy. Yeah. And it's sometimes hard to do when you're grieving. I was remembering going through that time after my mom died and just not wanting to eat anything, like being repelled by food. And it makes sense because here it's so funny, food and women, food and the mother. She was our first source, right? And when I think, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see why that happened for me. But one reason I specifically wanted to talk to you about this topic was because we're not allowed to talk about it, right? It's one of those topics. Death happens to everybody eventually, every single one of us. It's an inevitability. It happens to our loved ones, every single one. And yet there can often be a lot of surprise. And I think that surprise, at least for me, which may be rooted in some denial, can lead to a more traumatic passing for everybody involved. And in my experience, that has happened a couple times where I've had loved ones not be aware or want, how do I say this, totally in denial about dying as they're dying. And I'm sure you've seen this in your work. And it's just made the whole process so much more difficult, I feel, than it has to be. So I think that's why I have I took up the sword, took up the personal endeavor, or maybe also because I'm a last quarter moon child, Pluto in the 12th house. But I've used the kind of more unconscious deaths that I've experienced to become more conscious around everything to do with it, because I've felt intuitively this could be really beautiful. This could be the greatest journey of our life. This could be
Absolutely.
a spectacular adventure. Let's go. I know
Yeah.
it looks sad and it's
Yeah.
really hard to see people suffer, and that's the human. But there's an eternal piece in all of us that is going on a fantastic carpet ride.
It's differentiating between death and grief
Yeah.
because they're intimately tied. But actually, if we can just separate our experience of someone we love dying with the dying process and what they go on, you can really point beauty in that. The grief was its beauty as well because it can allow us to recreate our life. One of the challenges with grief is that people think it's contagious. So they don't know how to really interact with you in case they catch it first.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the comment, oh, but you're already good with this.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
good. So we don't need to, I don't even need to hug you or give you my shoulder
Yeah.
because I might catch it. That is interesting. Yeah. I think we all intuitively know that. It's really nice to hear you say that, though.
Not dissimilar to that talking about death doesn't make it happen to you any more than talking about having a baby makes you pregnant. It's there. You can talk about them. You can explore them. When I was running the Death Cafe, it was with that idea of what does death mean? What are our expectations? How would we like to die if you had a choice? Because you might think everyone would want quiet, easy, gentle, but some people know we want full-on drama. We want out with a bang. And
have you heard people say this?
yeah, all sorts of different ways.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I think one of the things that's helped me with that understanding that I can choose my experience has been looking at my astrology. Ironically, a lot of people see astrology as there's a lot of conditioning and superstition around that. This is going to happen to me, putting oneself outside of the experience. And I can even have in my human moments, when you talk about differentiating the grieving person, the soul in you, the divine aspect who knows that this is a big adventure for all of us, no matter what we're going through, that's included. But there is this, I'm losing my train of thought, but there's this part of this, our human self, that tends to put, oh, this is going to be bad, or this is going to be hard, or the sky is about to fall. And I tell you, as I was thinking about this the other day, because I'm about to have a new birthday, I'm about to have a birthday, new solar return. The astrology is an extra layer of stuff going on up here. I'm about to have a birthday and I will have a solar return chart. And for those who don't know, that's like the chart of your upcoming birthday year. It can clue you into different energies and experiences. And I was doing something else and I was like, oh, I forgot to check my solar return for the coming year. I'm going to do this real quick. So I go to my solar return and because this year featured Jupiter. I was like, oh, optimistic about it. And I go and I'm like, Mars is at the midheaven. Uranus is at the 7th house cusp. My sun is in the 8th house. My birthday is on the dark of the moon. And all of a sudden, I went into that space. We know better. But I went into that space of seeing the world acting upon me instead of me acting upon it. And it took me actually a few hours to calm my shit. And I go, oh, this can still happen to me. And a reminder to get centered before I look at astrology, number one, because I was doing this kind of harriedly, and I recognize that in hindsight. But it was a good reminder. And I thought about this for our call because it caused me to go back to every single piece of this chart for the coming year. And I'm like, wait a second, I am putting myself outside of this. I'm putting these external forces are going to act on me. What if I sat inside of it and I decided
Mhm.
I'm going to use that Mars to be a badass this year on the
Exactly.
midheaven and take names and just have a strategy and be courageous. And I'm going to use that Uranus on the seventh house. You know, what's going to happen is I'm going to have a surprise burst of public recognition. And in that eighth house, a dark on the moon placement with Jupiter, by the way, I'm going to become more psychic. So I actually just transform my whole perception. And so I offer that to us and to you in terms of using astrology in this topic.
It is, and I don't know if it's because I natally have Jupiter trine my sun, but I'm always looking for the most positive when I look at a benchmark. Always, or any other chart. My daughter often tells me off about this. She goes, sometimes just awful things happen. I'm like, yeah, but I think also reading Tracy Marks's book, is it called The Astrology of Self-Discovery? It's fantastic.
Love that book.
That part at the end about co-creating with the planets, it's a game changer when they're not happening to you. Work together. What is that planet? What are the energies? What do I want from it? I remember, and it was before I'd read that book, but Saturn was coming up to my ascendant. And a lot of astrologers would say, oh, it's not going to be a great time, Saturn going over your front door. And I'm thinking, my identity's going to change. It'll be in Sagittarius. So I thought, I'll at least start learning to run, even though I've never run before. So I was using that Sagittarius energy, the thigh, doing that. Yeah. And the day it hit my ascendant, I picked my older daughter up, who was 19 at the time, from university. She was home for Christmas. And she said, oh, I've got something to tell you. And she told me she was pregnant and obviously thought I might go a bit crazy because of her age. It took me about a nanosecond to go, oh my God, congratulations. I was just so excited. And it was like, of course, Saturn, my identity changing, becoming a grandmother. And then, of course, Saturn moved along, retrograded, and was back at the same point when my granddaughter was born. Wow. That was one of the best transits of my life. So I have no fear, whether it's Saturn or any other planet. It's like, what could you care?
Yeah, we're all different that way. I definitely see that tendency in a lot of people, a lot of astrologers out there that, making the strange predictions or I just like that Chicken Little, the sky is about to fall. And you can do that with almost any single transit. So I feel like when we're talking about this particular subject of looking at like the transits of death, right? It does require a little bit of framework holding. How am I going to hold this? What philosophy am I going to bring to this experience, this life experience, as you're looking at a chart of what you're going through, like we've looked at when our mothers died? I'm sure you can tell me about what transits you were experiencing. I've made correlations. And of course, I have that memory now of, oh, when this happens, that has happened in the past. And I think we can be our own worst enemies in that regard. But definitely for me, one of the pieces I've seen happen time and again for the female lineage passing, it's been a aspect to my natal Ceres. Now, Ceres is the great mother asteroid. And maybe if I hadn't known about asteroids, I would have looked to the moon and I would have fallen short because I can't find much going on with the moon. And in these times when my two grandmothers and my mother passed, both were featuring pretty strong transits. One, Pluto with my mother. Pluto was transiting my Ceres, but the others were Saturn as my Ceres. So there's my great nurturer, great mother figure being taken out of my life. And when I see Ceres now, and of course, it's given me the opportunity to expand on how I see her. I have a lot more to say now because I've been through the mythic journey. I can get excited about her because I want to help people understand what that actually feels like and how connected she is to the cycles of life and all of nature. because she was Demeter, mother of Persephone. When she lost her daughter 6 months of the year, she just threw a scourge on the land and said, nobody gets to eat. Sorry. Nobody gets anything from me. I'm pissed. I'm mad. I'm sad. And how that is grief.
Yes.
It's like all of it. Yeah. And so even this mythic character went through this. And so when I see that energy come up, I'm like, wow, something's going on here. And I actually have bits and morsels of encouragement through that too. So when you see, and as you've looked at your own chart and transits, what's happening for you as you've lost people in your life, what significators have you noticed and how have you held that with your positive Jupiter?
When my mum died, Mars was trining my moon, and I'm like, are you kidding me? A trine? Mars was going through the 8th house in Cancer, the mother. What I find interesting is that when my dad died, the moon was in Pisces. When my mum died, the moon was in Pisces. She died on the new moon. Obviously, years and years apart in their death. And that because my 4th house is Pisces, that emotional thing of, oh, yep, they're gone. Also, when my dad died, Neptune was at the beginning of my 4th house. When my mum died, it was at the end. So that's a really strong theme for me. And what's interesting is that my natal Neptune is in Scorpio. I think there's quite a tie there. There was like every planet going in Pisces when my mum died. In my chart, that bottom of the chart, all that water. And I did spend 2 months crying all night long. I just sobbed my heart out in bed. Not because I'm scared of death for myself. I don't care about dying. I think there's so much with grief that actually isn't even related to death. It can be to do with someone's unfulfilled dreams or traumas that they've been through in life. And there's just
So true.
so much stuff there.
So true. All comes out. The
Yeah.
kitchen sink, everything that you can imagine. And it's ongoing too. I think I shared with you that I feel like this conversation is happening at a time right now where I'm doing something different with my own mother's loss. So we'll see how that unfolds. But I wanted to your point of the 4th house and also Pisces energy. Okay.
And also, what I find interesting, I mentioned about, I get to see a lot of birth charts through looking at the charts of that I work with, just like what was happening in the world that day, what were the planets on the day they were born. But then obviously I have a date of death as well. And so often it's Jupiter, Neptune in there. It'd be so easy to think, oh, it's Pluto doing its thing.
Thank you.
Neptune,
You
Jupiter.
read my mind. You absolutely read my mind. That
And
gave me such hope
Yeah.
when I pulled this death chart up for my mother and I was feeling awful about it. And all those things you talked about, the unfulfilled dreams, the unfinished lives, the unfulfilled relationship between her and I, the healing that I wanted to have happen that did not occur and would not happen in this lifetime now. And so all these things were up. And I pulled up the astrology and I went, Jupiter, Neptune.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think I shared that with you, that time of her death, just the time itself. I happen to know the exact minute my mom died. And Neptune was right on the ascendant and it was leading this whole stellium that featured Jupiter. And it was so packed into the first house of that moment, which has to do with body.
Yeah.
And the first house has to do with our first breath and when we come into form. And there she was leaving at this Neptune, Jupiter, this magnificent, like all the energy in the sky was concentrated right here. And I was like, holy crap, that feels good. And that made me feel good. Yeah.
It's an amazing thing. Your Venus was on your, I think, was it Venus on your Jupiter?
Yeah.
When you moved on, so you're asking
Makes the stuff that.
Yeah, that's what I get it. Exactly.
Oh, it's all Pluto. It's all Pluto. We get this ingrained in us. And I think, again, going back to the conditioning around death and the fears, and that like when we see something in the birth chart that has anything plutonic, we instantly go to the worst, right? And yet, what freedom,
Yeah.
what liberation. And I was like, yeah, Mom, good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you for choosing this moment. Because the
Well, I think
process itself was really painful, but
yeah.
the death gave me such hope.
And not that I can definitively answer this, but I don't think death itself is traumatic.
Yeah.
The lead up to it, obviously, can
Yes.
be. People are being tortured or suffering or whatever, or there are some things that I would think of as being an horrific way to go.
Yeah.
But that moment of death isn't painful.
No. I've heard that it's pretty awesome. It's a little shocking, but it's pretty awesome. I'm
Can I
not.
share with you, when
Yeah.
my mother died, I
Yeah,
wasn't
please.
there. She was in Australia. But my brother, my eldest brother, was with her. And she'd been put into a deep coma the last couple of days, completely out of it. There was no waking up from that. They do there at that point. But at 11:11 a.m. with the new moon in Pisces, and it was the day of the rare planetary alignment, she suddenly took this big breath, opened her eyes, and then whooshed it all out. And that was it, gone. It's like, what caused her to open her eyes out of something she was not going to do? And after all those tiny, barely noticeable breaths, just this huge breath. Like somebody was saying, come on, let's go.
Isn't that goosebumps? I can feel that. I can feel that.
Yeah. And that brings me joy.
Yes.
Despite all the waterworks and everything else, that is finally, because all she ever wanted to do in her life was ascend.
Oh, good for her.
When my mother-in-law died many years ago, about 20 odd years ago, I was with her, and she had been not in a coma, but completely, again, not waking up again, and flattened back. And then suddenly she just sat up, bolt upright, with her arms in front of her. And I hear so many stories like that. It's like, who are they seeing?
Yeah.
Seeing someone, aren't they?
Yeah.
Enough to make them physically do something that they can't do. And if we talk about is death gift, to me, that's beautiful.
So beautiful.
One of my favorite funeral readings, if you ever get the chance to look at it, is called The Ship by Bishop Brent.
Okay.
And it's very much about this magnificent ship. She leaves my side and off she goes to the sea. And I'm ad-libbing here, of course. And finally she becomes this speck on the horizon. And just that moment when someone says, at my side says, there, she is gone. Somebody else says, here she comes. And it's beautiful. I really love reading it with you.
That with Veronika.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah. And I think when we get emotional, it's because we know one day that's going to be us and someone's going to be waiting for us. And that's a beautiful thing as well. And that we're never alone, not just at death, but now, right now. All those, whatever you want to call them, ancestors.
Yeah.
That's my belief anyway.
Yeah. That's my feeling. Honestly, as a Cancer, I just don't even qualify it with belief anymore, even though I have a 9th house sun. It's my feeling. It's my deep feeling. And my husband, forever the scientist, says, yeah, I look forward to finding out. And and I'm going to be there right at your side going, hold yourself. And I don't mean to be arrogant about that. I just so feel it. I so feel what you're saying is just 1,000% true. That, like you said, the waterworks start because we recognize the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, we humans go through life, particularly in this culture, with this fear of death, and we're grabbing for all the material possessions and career trajectories, all those sorts of things. And what amazes me is how many people, they get to their 80s, their 90s, whatever, and they're like, I'm done now. I just want to go. I'm tired. in a way they wouldn't have done when they were 30 or 40. But suddenly it's, yeah, that's it. And there's something beautiful in that as well, that surrender.
It just seems to me as we age, I'm at the ripe age of about to turn 52, but it's just like this ongoing process of letting go. And I like couldn't have understood that in my 20s. Like you said, death terrified me, I would say. As I've gotten wiser and older, I can see how, oh, this is fun and I can definitely leave it behind. Oh, that's not so fun. And yeah, that's going to be interesting when I just let it all go. And I've felt this kind of this gradual, you're describing it like a journey. Isn't that trajectory interesting that we all eventually get there to the point of total release?
Yeah.
That's beautiful too. So there's so much beauty in kind of befriending death and talking about it and learning from it and making a part of your every day. Now, not maybe as every day as Veronika. I mean, sometimes it's okay to take a break. Like I always remember Stephen for South Node in Scorpio, North Node in Taurus, saying working through eighth house issues and Scorpio death and conflict and trauma and psychology. And it's good to just go out for a walk in the garden. It's good to just have an ice cream cone. It's good to watch a funny movie, right? You have to do that to balance this out, I feel. But I definitely feel like there could be more of thinking about this inevitability and kind of as we talk about it and think about it, like just as we consciously decide to manifest success in our careers and book deals and all of the worldly things, why can't we consciously decide to manifest the death of our choice when we want it? What do you think about that?
I have long been saying to the universe that I will be in my bed when I die, in the comfort of my home, and it will be a conscious, peaceful process. It won't be preceded by ill health or anything like that. It'll just be like,
Good for you.
to leave now.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, like I've told conscious universe, I've had enough of surprises and drama and trauma in my life. I have Uranus on my ascendant. I came into the world. My mom was hemorrhaging when she gave birth to me. So I had this mark of trauma. I've decided I have eighth house Taurus cusp that my passing, similar, it's going to be sweet. And it's going to be
Venus ruled.
Venus rule. It might be even a degree of slow Taurus. I do want to take my time and make sure that I'm ready to go versus the fast quickness of trauma deaths. I would like that kind of slow opportunity to say goodbye to Earth. I don't know if I'm going to come back, right? And to loved ones. And like you, of course, I also want to be comfortable in my own family and not suffer. Yeah, just add that on the end. But I discuss this with my husband. We talk about who's going first and kind of what that will look like. And not just from the kind of, do I have the password to be able to pay the bills? I think that's an important discussion to have. But also, do I want you to come visit me in dreams? Like we talk about this.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like building more comfort in.
Yeah.
Is just like more familiarity, more comfort. So it's more natural because it is natural. Let's not be taken off guard. Like I would really like, if anybody's listening who's going to die, who I love, for you to be conscious of your own death, that you're die, and that when you get diagnosed, you may die. And let's talk about it, or let's at least not be in denial.
Yeah. It's a really, I think it's such an important topic. And again, it's why death cafes can be really good, because it allows people to think about their death, think about their funeral, and have those conversations with their loved ones.
Yeah. So important. So important for everybody. And I just feel like for those people I've lost who weren't able to have those conversations for one reason or another, or just were not wanting to go, there weren't those moments of where you want to have that connection. What do you need to tell me? There just weren't
Mm.
those moments. And so I hear about those sometimes with other people who have had those moments. Oh, let's share this finally. And I didn't have that. So I think it's just a beautiful intention to hold for everybody involved. Yeah.
You touched on just a moment ago about dreams, about visiting when you've died. Can I share a couple of experiences?
Please. Yeah.
So when my dad died, and he died shockingly, it was in a car accident. And there's a massive difference between when someone dies suddenly and having anticipatory grief. The latter I found far worse because you've
I
got
agree.
all that lead up, then you don't get to say goodbye with a sudden death, but I'm sure it's a bit easier on the system. Anyway, when he died, I have in my bedroom, there's a little alcove in the wall. I'm in a really old house. It's hundreds of years old, so they've just created this alcove. And it's got a little light in there. And I made an altar for him with his photo and a couple of things to do with that. And then when I did, I just put the light on to shine on it for a little bit. And then that night I had a dream. And in the dream, he came to me and said, "Oh, I want to show you the light where I am." And it just took me to the universe, all the stars and everything like that. It still makes me so emotional.
And was that the night he died? You had that dream?
The night I made the altar, which would have been maybe a day after he died.
The day after.
Yeah.
Just really powerful.
My mum's been to me in my dreams a few times since she died, but one of the dreams really made me laugh because, as I said, she essentially starved herself to death and refused liquid and whatever. But in the dream, she was going through my cupboards looking for food and treats, and guess what? Yeah, it's a bit late for that now. So that bit of humor, and she was a Gemini. She was such a trickster.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's great. Wow. Wow. Speaking of dreams, visitations. I had a premonitory dream before, actually, I could have been dreaming it while my aunt died. So my mother's sister, died in a tragic, also car accident, a hit and run, a drunk driver. And she lived many states away from me at the time. And I had a dream where I was saying goodbye to my sister. And my sister was getting on a bus and going somewhere, and we were hugging. And when I woke up, it was just like I'm getting goosebumps. I just was like, huh, where is she going? And then that morning, found out that my aunt was hit and taken by a vehicle, right? And that was one of my first experiences of premonition. I think I shared this with you, but I do sometimes have premonitions of death specifically, or something around death, where I'll get a message, an incoming message. But that was one of my first, and I was in my, I think it was maybe my early 30s. And so I've had that happen before. I have that happen, and I haven't had any visitations that I'm aware of. But I do receive sometimes premonition empathically or in dreams. So it's really interesting how, again, proof of connection, proof of how connected we are, just like with your stories, like of dreaming, just like, wow, who orchestrated that?
Whoa.
While I'm rummaging through your cupboards and just that's just fun.
Breaking the veil between this world and the next is really thin. And if we're someone who's open to that, I think we just almost cross between them.
Yeah.
Like looking all the time.
Yeah. And I think for people like us, we're working with energies in different capacities, and we are open to it. But I think that, again, that talking and becoming aware of and having more conversations like this, it's like remembering that you have intuition or that you do have connection. We just forget. We're preoccupied by what we see outside of us. We're preoccupied by this very convincing illusion that we live in. And then at certain points, we can just decide, hey, I want this to happen for me. I would love to have a conversation with a loved one in a dream. There's a variety of ways to do that. I think this would be like a good kind of ending point, if you have any ideas that you share with, have you ever shared that with any of your families about connecting after the fact?
Yeah, that would depend. I'm always led by where the conversation is going.
Sure.
So I'll get a lot of
But you're
families.
sensitive to it. You don't want to put something out there for somebody who's not receptive. Yeah.
Okay. But I've heard a lot of stories from families where they've had visitations and things like that, which is lovely. But one of my favorite stories happened quite recently, and it was a lady whose daughter died young, early 20s, drug overdose. And the mum had said to me, I just want her to give me a sign. I want a white feather. And that's quite a common one for families, white feathers or red robins. And I said, I'm sure she'll send you a white feather. And I went home and wrote the eulogy, and I was sitting outside on the porch too, because I like to be in the garden when I write, if the weather's fine. And I'd written the eulogy, and I was just reading it out loud from my laptop. And when I said her daughter's name, something caught my eye, and I looked up, and a white feather was just falling down in front of me. Anyway, so I took it to her, and I said, this is your white feather. I know it came through me, not directly to you, but it was as I said her name.
Beautiful.
I'd just written a eulogy. But yeah, all sorts of things. Interestingly, I also, when I've said I've been able to look at the charts of people the day they were born, the synastry between me and the person whose funeral I'm doing, every time like that sense of that it's no accident that I'm being their spokesperson.
I absolutely feel that way with you. In fact, when I noticed that my mother died during the last time Saturn was in Aries, and that you have Saturn in Aries in the fifth house of heart, I was like, oh, did I just sign up to do open heart surgery with Veronika shattered? Talking about death. I believe that for you. You are in such a unique calling that how could you not be magically, mystically, otherworldly led to these connections and experiences and feathers and what you channel as a storyteller, all of it.
And sometimes I feel there are messages coming before I even visit the family. So there was one day I was looking for a notepad to take to the family visit, and I've got notepads everywhere and just need to check, are there enough pages in there for the visit? And I picked one up, but it was full of flowers that I'd been pressing for my granddaughter. They all were dropping on the floor, and I thought, oh, I can't take that because I'm going to the hospice. Find something so I can have flowers in it. I get to the hospice, and we're about a minute into the meeting, and one of us saying about their loved one, that he used to collect flowers so he could press them. He loved doing that. And I'm like, what are the odds of a man pressing flowers and it being the person I've just come to see when I've had all these fall on my floor? And it's that sort of thing that just happens to me all the time.
I bet. And what are the odds that I just wrote about a bookmark business I started as a kid where I press flowers? I just wrote about that yesterday.
Oh, that is funny.
I had a pressed flowers bookmark business. I sold them door to door.
Oh, that is so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my kid.
That was beautiful.
Oh, such a rich discussion. I feel like we're going to have to come back to it again. We could probably keep talking for hours, and we've talked for about an hour. So
you do realize that your Venus sits in my 8th house.
I did not realize that, but I noticed some other things that we like. Don't we have a Venus trine?
Yeah.
Venus.
Yeah. And so yeah, I know. But that was lovely.
And your moon trines my midheaven and sextiles my IC, which we didn't even talk about. I just wanted to the 4th house, I feel is connected in a lot of depth charts and tests. The end of the matter. In a horror astrology, the 4th house is the end of the matter. And often it describes our experiences later in life. Yeah, the 8th house isn't the only chart. Yeah, or only house connected to death in the chart. But yeah, yeah.
Sorry,
No, you go.
Oh, I guess it was that, and you were saying the 4th, and then I was thinking of mine with Pisces, but then also Neptune, and I guess the 12th house as well. And it makes sense that Neptune would be involved in death, because if we think about the 12th house, it's almost where we touch the face of God.
Absolutely.
If you want to use that expression. And it's like, where else are you going to do it than when you're leaving that body behind and going?
Yeah. That's
Just
that's,
like the
that's the
grievance.
expression that your people had when they were like,
Yeah.
it's just like going beyond the veil, absolutely, and joining with source energy. But yeah, there's a lot of other energies in the birth chart, in the astrological sky, I should say too, that can help us navigate our own relationship to death, and including our natal 8th house, including our natal 4th house, and how we want to consciously decide to go, how we would like our death to be. So maybe another topic for another time would be going into that 8th house a little more deeply, because that can describe, I've been through charts that describe the nature of a death. You pointed that out in my own mother's chart. You saw that. You said, did she die suddenly? Uranus is her 8th house, and of something lung related is what you said, because it's Gemini. And I did die somewhat suddenly, but it was a brain tumor, but the mind was Gemini as well. So you can find the nature of your own death. But that, I think, my friends, is a topic for another day.
It's never ending, isn't it? It's
And bottomless with astrology and with the 8th house.
exactly.
But I think that this was just such a, I think, healing conversation from anybody who's listening. It definitely felt that way for me. And I hope that we can continue the conversation, Veronika, because you are such a resource in not only in this realm and in astrology, but as a writer. That would be a fun conversation to have another time too, about your work as a writer and your creativity, a little lighter, a little give you reprieve from your celebrant duties.
Well, I don't write about death in my books. In my novels, there's always
I've read one of your novels, and that was more romantic and magical. So I think you balance it out well with your creative self and remembering to nurture her. Yeah. And it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for asking me.
And I look forward to it again. I'll save it up. Okay, have a good evening.
All right. Thank you.
Mahalo.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.